An influx of thousands of migrants has caused a diplomatic row between Morocco and Spain and raised concern about the fate of those streaming in from North Africa into Ceuta. So, why are these people taking this risky route? And how does it affect migration across Europe? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. Many migrants using dinghies have often made the dangerous journey from Morocco into Spain. But this week, an influx of at least 8,000 people was unusually high, threatening a humanitarian crisis. Many were young men, but there were also families and unaccompanied minors. At least one person died making the crossing. Thousands have been expelled by the Spanish authorities. Campaigners are worried the migrants' rights have been violated during what they describe as a rapid pace of expulsions. The number of arrivals has now dropped in what appears to be an attempt by Moroccan authorities to tighten border controls. Police scuffled with people as they tried to force their way into the Spanish enclave of Ceuta. The event has caused a diplomatic row between the two countries. We'll get to that in a moment, but first, let's hear one boy's story.
You watch your parents unable to work. The education system is very weak. What can I say? People don't have much to eat. My parents thought that if I came here I could have a future. Over in Morocco, even with a diploma, it is like you have nothing. I'm cold. All I want is some clothes. I don't have anything.
So why has Ceuta become a flashpoint in all of this? The tiny enclave is found right here on the African side of the Strait of Gibraltar. It's one of two Spanish territories on mainland Africa. Despite fences and strict policing, thousands attempt to cross from Morocco into Ceuta every year. The Spanish government has accused Morocco of being responsible for the influx of migrants and has threatened to use force to stop people entering. The president of Ceuta called the influx an invasion. Morocco has denied that and recalled its ambassador from Madrid. Rabat is reported to have been angered after Spain allowed in the head of the POLISARIO Front, Ibrahim Ghali, for medical treatment last month. The POLISARIO Front and Morocco are technically still at war over the Western Sahara, a former Spanish colony in North Africa that's been under Rabat's control since 1975. And Morocco continues to claim the enclaves of Ceuta and Melilla. On Wednesday, Spain's High Court summoned Ghali over alleged war crimes, but he refused to acknowledge it. All right, let's bring in our guests in Brussels. Catherine WOOLLARD is Secretary General of European Council on Refugees and Exiles. In Madrid, Ruth Ferrero is lecturer in political science and senior researcher at Complutense University of Madrid. In Rabat, Lahsan Haddad is strategic affairs analyst and former Moroccan minister. A warm welcome to you all. Catherine, let me start with you today. So more than 8,000 migrants arrived on the beaches of Ceuta in just a couple of days. How does this sudden and very large arrival compare to movements of migrants in the past few years? And has there ever in the past been an arrival at one time of this magnitude?
We've seen similar arrivals and in other parts of Europe, and this is due to the record numbers of people who are forcibly displaced globally. There are more refugees than there have ever been before, and the majority of those arriving in Europe are refugees. There's also people who are forced to move for other reasons. We would urge Spain, as all countries in Europe, to respect EU and international law when faced with these arrivals of people. And despite the dramatic scenes, the overall numbers of people arriving are manageable. I think what we see here is also the risk of relying on other countries outside Europe, such as Morocco or such as Turkey, to try to prevent people from coming to Europe. And that creates the risk that we see in an unrelated diplomatic incident, as you so rightly described, that people are instrumentalized or used to pursue other ends.
Ruth, Spain's Foreign Minister Arantxa González Laya has said that Spain believes Morocco loosened its border controls in retaliation for Spain having given medical assistance to the Polisario Front head, Ibrahim Ghali. From your vantage point, do you think that this was a retaliatory move by Morocco?
I believe that this is the excuse for Morocco to open the gates for 48 hours. I think there is some more deeply geopolitical concerns on Morocco's side, which are linked with the recognition of the United States of Donald Trump to recognize the sovereignty of Morocco over Sahara province, Sahara territory. So then this Sahrawi person in the hospital has been just an excuse to overreact with this kind of, as my colleague just said, instrumentalize people to reach political goals.
Lahsan, Morocco had warned of consequences for harboring Brahim Ghali. Is this what Morocco meant? Are we hearing more from Moroccan officials about all this?
I don't think there is an instrumentalization or weaponization of migration on the part of Morocco, and the majority of those who have crossed have returned. About 5,000 have returned. And migration in huge numbers has always existed between the two countries, and I think there was collaboration between the two. But the fact that it happened in the wake of diplomatic tensions then led to a lot of interpretation, like there is blackmail on the part of Morocco, but what is interesting is that the Moroccan-Spanish crisis that existed these last weeks, the Spanish have been pretending that they are the victims of crisis, whereas they are responsible for this. They shouldn't have done what they have done. I mean, like admitting somebody who is accused of being a war criminal and being, like somebody who committed like genocide kind of crimes, and who has been at war with Morocco, who acts on the behalf of Algeria to attack the territorial integrity of Morocco, and is requested by the Spanish justice system. That's something that is not understandable at all. Even the Spanish people don't understand how the Spanish government could do that. And not only do they do that, but they do it with the complicity of Algeria. And he was brought with a false Algerian passport in the name of Mohammed Ben Battoush, put in a hospital, and they were expecting that the Moroccan secret services would not know that. So that's a little bit like naive. So there was like a mismanagement on the part of the Spanish government, and they have not explained to the Moroccans like what is the intelligence of the strategy, why is it like geopolitically sound, how would you do that with a partner, and with whom you have a lot of interest like Morocco. That's something that is mind-boggling. And I think what happened in terms of the migration, the mass migration in Ceuta, just added and exacerbated an already kind of tense diplomatic relation between the Spanish and the Moroccans. And I think these kinds of things happen, but I believe that this happened at this moment, and it's unfortunate, but also I think it does not mean that the Moroccan government has used the Moroccan government. Probably, I've been in the government. We don't have like something to push, and then you have thousands of people who would migrate. But I think there is an objective situation in the north of Morocco whereby the economic livelihood of a lot of people have been diminished because of the closure of the border with Ceuta and Melilla. And the second one is that the pandemic has also made like people's livelihood.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me get back to you on that point that you're making about the pandemic in just a couple of moments, because I do want to follow up with you on that. Catherine, I saw you nodding to some of what Lahsan was saying there. It looked like you wanted to jump in. Please go ahead.
Yes, I think it's a complex situation. There are multiple reasons why people move. Many are forced to move due to economic concerns, but also war, conflict, and so on. And I think from our side, underlying this recent incident is the European strategy of relying on other countries to try to prevent people coming to Europe. And we would suggest instead a longer term, more nuanced strategy on the part of Europe. So that would involve, for instance, reopening legal routes for migration so that there isn't this humanitarian crisis evolving week by week in the Mediterranean. And that means legal routes for people who are seeking asylum, but also for people who want to come to Europe to work, which is much needed. And in the last 20 years, we've seen an ever-increasing reduction in the opportunities for legal migration into Europe. So I think those are ways to deal with this. In addition, we would suggest a more collective approach by Europe so that the countries where people arrive are not left alone and are changing the rules so that there's fairer sharing of responsibility within Europe. I would also add that we can't ignore the history in all of this. These enclaves exist, they're part of Europe's colonial legacy in Africa, and as such, they're rather vulnerable because they're enclaves on another continent. So that doesn't justify the actions of either government, but all those factors have to be taken into account rather than a sort of knee-jerk reaction, which is simply to build fences to prevent people moving.
Ruth, so we've been talking a bit about how Brahim Ghali and his treatment in Spain has really been sort of at the center of this diplomatic dispute between Spain and Morocco. It's been reported that Spain's High Court has served Ghali with a June 1st summons for a preliminary hearing in a war crimes case against him, and that this is potentially the first step towards a trial for the Polisario Front leader. Do you think that we will see Ghali in a court in Spain in the near future?
I don't hesitate that it will appear in front of the court, but let me contextualize the whole thing and why I mentioned that I think this issue is just an excuse made by the Moroccan government. In March, there was a diplomatic conflict also between Rabat and Germany. They even didn't open any communication with the German ambassador, and this is inside of a bigger negotiation, and we are expecting a new sentence coming from Luxembourg Court of Justice, the European Court of Justice, by which apparently the agreement reached between Morocco and the European Union on association and fisheries will be laid down. And so that suspension of the agreement will delegitimize the Morocco authorities on the territory of the Western Sahara. So we have to reach and to focus and to frame the whole situation in a bigger picture in which it included these issues on sovereignty, issues on geopolitics, issues on trade, and also trying coming and the pushing of Morocco, trying to make change positions on the Western Sahara region by the European Union. So I think we have to analyze it in the whole frame. On the other hand, I'm totally agree with the issues that Catherine is mentioned. But since we have to, so I support 100% what she was just saying. We are leaving our migration policy in the hands of non-democratic countries like Turkey or even Morocco. And this is not the way. We have to change radically the migration governance of the European Union and the member states, and also on the global side. So we cannot pay off all these blackmails that have been doing these countries, like Turkey did last year on the Greece borders, or what the Morocco is doing right now, because they wanted to reach political goals through using people, poor people, which also, of course, they are affected about the pandemic and the endemia, if you want, on the socioeconomic impact of this. And also because a lot of these guys and women and child that were crossing by, they used to be working in Ceuta. So since the borders were closed for all this time, they really would need, because they are not very protected. And let me do a criticism
Ruth,
also to the treatment that the Spanish government is doing to these
Ruth,
people as well.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me just go over to Lahsan right now, because I interrupted you before. You were making a point about some of the underlying causes of the migration, from your vantage point, and you were starting to talk about the pandemic as one of them. Please go ahead.
No, just to respond to what Ruth has just said, I don't think, there has been a lot of Spanish also coming to Morocco, and because they come legally, then there was no problem with them. So I agree with Catherine that legal kind of migration should be the issue to these kinds of situations. There is much need for labor in Europe. But for example, there are about 20,000 Spanish people who came to Morocco after the financial crisis, and they are there because there are no hurdles for that. But I mean, the other thing, I mean, like Ruth says that democratic and non-democratic countries, but I'm wondering if democratic governments like the Spanish government who hosts a war criminal, that says a lot about like what kind of democracy we're talking about here. But anyway, I mean, like with regard to blackmailing, the Moroccans, when I talked to them, I talked to the Moroccan officials, and they said, well, look, what the Spanish want us to be is to be zealous gendarmes of illegal migration. They want us to be loyal partners in the fight against terrorism. They want us to be good economic partners. They want us to be understanding to colonial situation whereby Ceuta and Melilla are colonized by Spain, but still the Moroccans need to probably like take it easy with regard to that. At the same time, when there is a problem, they need to be silent. Otherwise, the Spanish, you know what they will tell you? They will tell you you are blackmailing us. You are using migration, you are using terrorism in order to blackmail us, in order to make concessions. I don't think this is partnership, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, having analyzed a lot of other things, I mean, with regard to that. But I mean, let's go back to what are the roots of this kind of
Lahsan, I'm sorry again, I'll get right back to you. I saw Ruth there raise her hand and wanted to respond to something you said, so I wanted to let her go. Ruth, just please keep it brief so I can get back to Lahsan, and then I need to ask Catherine another question, please.
Yes, just to mention, I'm not an official from the Spanish government, and probably I'm agree with my colleague in here, but this is not the point we are discussing right now. We are discussing why the government authorities just open up the borders of in between Morocco and Ceuta. And there has not been any explanation about it coming from the Morocco government. There is no cause effect in anything that you guys just said that explains why this agreement that had been reached between the European Union, because we cannot forget that this is a border of the European Union with a third country, which in this case is Morocco, has been not accomplished. And they had just laid down and opened the gates and let these poor guys going through the waters.
All right, Lahsan, please go ahead if you want to respond to Ruth.
No, just yeah. I mean, we can go back to this point that Ruth has raised, but let's go back to the reasons. One of the reasons is like the idea of a fortress Europe that has really like walls and all of that, preventing all the people from coming there. I don't think that has borne any kinds of fruits. It has led to these kinds of problems. So I agree with Catherine that we need to go into legal issues and allowing this kind of migration to happen in a very legal manner. The second thing is like, because of the colonial situation in Ceuta and Melilla, then, and also a lot of, I mean, like what has been happening is a lot of contraband coming from Ceuta and Melilla and hurting the Moroccan economy. The Moroccans have closed the borders for economic kind of interaction. That meant that a lot of livelihoods up in the north of Morocco have been hurt. And the pandemics have added to that. So I think these kinds of issues are what needs to be discussed. And I don't think we have proof that the Moroccans have opened the gates. And as I have said before, Moroccans don't have like these kinds of gates full of people, and then sometimes they open them and they swarm to Ceuta and Melilla. I don't think that's really credible, and people who are on the ground would see that for themselves. But this exists in the Spanish imagination a lot, that Morocco is only there harboring like thousands of people, and at any moment that there was a brawl with the Spanish, then they let those go. I don't think that that's the situation. I think there is a very important economic situation, socioeconomic situation that needs to be dealt with. There is a problem of livelihoods. There is a problems of perception of an El Dorado on the other side. And there are also like policy problems with regard to the European Union when it comes to migration. If these things are not addressed, we will have these kinds of situations. And we will have like all kinds of instrumentalization of these kinds of issues.
Catherine, let me ask you this. So rights groups have been warning that the fact that these migrants have been returned to Morocco as quickly as they have, that could mean that migrant rights are being violated. They've said that there hasn't been enough time to carry out examinations of individual circumstances, that migrants may not have had a chance to apply for asylum or to make other types of claims. do you believe that what we've seen play out over these past few days, the rapid expulsion, no matter if there's an agreement between the two countries, but do you believe that this rapid expulsion of these migrants is a violation of either European law, international human rights law, or refugee law?
It's possible that violations are taking place, and we've joined the calls expressing concern about the situation. And we would underline that people arriving in any EU member state, or even indeed at the border of any EU member state, are under the jurisdiction of that country. This means that EU asylum law applies, and also international law under the European Convention on Human Rights, international refugee law. So a situation where people are being collectively expelled without individual assessment is a situation that's illegal under both EU and international law. And instead, there should be an individualized assessment. And indeed, there's also standards and legal obligations when it comes to the reception of people arriving. So there may be issues concerned with access to asylum, and then in terms of the treatment of people where states have obligations to respect the Reception Conditions Directive and procedural obligations. And these are complex situations because there may be refugees and people with other kind of statuses, but the way to determine what is the appropriate path for somebody is to do the individual assessment. And on that basis, it can be determined if the person has protection needs, as many people arriving in Europe do under the Refugee Convention, or under subsidiary protection due to fleeing from conflict, for example.
Ruth, I saw you nodding to some of what Catherine was saying, so I'm going to give you a chance to jump in. But I also want to ask you, do we have any idea what exactly is happening to the unaccompanied minors who have arrived in Ceuta? Are they being sent back as well? Because as I understand it, from what I've read, Spanish law dictates that these unaccompanied minors must remain in Spanish territory until there's a further investigation, a determination about their status, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Totally agree with Catherine. This has been happening, a violation of not just international laws on refugees, also there's a violation of the norms and the sentence and the jurisprudence made by the Human Rights Court in Strasbourg, and also the Constitutional Court of Justice in Spain, that had made a jurisprudence, a sentence on last December, saying that they have been procedures to be accomplished, and in the way in which the deportations the refusals are being done on the borders right now are clearly violating those sentences. So totally agree with Catherine. On the minors, non-accompanied minors, they cannot be deported at all. It is the responsibility of the autonomous region and the state to take care of them and give them provisions for taking care and social services, etc., until they're older than 18 years old. We have to see now, I guess, in the next few days, how these different autonomous communities are going to be offering places in their territories, because of course those boys and girls cannot remain in Ceuta because there are a lot of them, and it's not a possibility for them to remain in this field. The main problem is that because the Spanish authorities are not following the rule of law, some of those childs have been deported already. And so we have to follow up and see what happened. On the other hand, there has been some curious movements on the border. I guess our colleague from Morocco can tell us about it, because a lot of them, a big proportion of them, the guys who were entering the borders, they just go out of the borders by their foot. So they were not forced to do it, not just minors, but also adults and other people. So it's kind of suspicious that they were like going on an excursion and then going out. But I really don't know what's going on there. So maybe our Moroccan colleague can help us with that.
Well, we've just run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the discussion there. But I want to thank all of the guests today, Catherine WOOLLARD, Ruth Ferrero, and Lahsan Haddad. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see this program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.